So Chanel, at the start of the year, I came across something cool. Can't remember where, but the author spoke about this year being focused on creating rather than just consuming. And that is something that struck me because in the consumer-driven world we live in now, it is very easy to just consume. I mean, you can eat, you can watch whatever you want on demand. You've got your phone with you, which you can pick up and look at whatever you want. And we've become accustomed to just be consistently consuming. And I think as a result, we don't necessarily create many things anymore. So with that in mind, I found myself being in the same position and thinking, well, that can't be good. That can't be beneficial. And started thinking about what does it actually feel like when we are just constantly consuming. So that maybe is the first question. What does it feel like to you when you consume too much, whatever it might be?
Hard question. So I think I came across a similar concept in a podcast I listened to recently. So I think the way they explained it, and I liked the idea, was around that concept of foraging. And they said, so I like the analogy they made around how it used to be and how it is now. So, for example, we go onto the internet now and we open a bunch of different tabs because we've got high-speed internet, so we can read a lot of different things. And I'm going to answer your question in a second, so just bear with me. But you've got so many tabs open and you can read and you can kind of pick and choose what you want to read on each tab. You don't have to really filter through everything. Whereas back in the day, and I still remember when we just got like dial-up internet and you had to wait and you'd hear that beep, boo, and you'd wait for it to load. And when it opened, you were so excited and you would read every sentence once, twice, make sure you understood the content. You would print it out even and keep it because it took so long to get there. It took so long to get the information. So I think it speaks to the question around the over-consuming. So I've noticed recently that having all these tabs open is so easy and so convenient, but you end up feeling more confused because you will Google the topic or you will use AI to search a specific topic, and you get a whole bunch of tabs with a lot of information, some of it conflicting, some of it very much aligned with a specific agenda, which I've noticed as well. And you often feel almost less empowered with more and more and more, and you actually not getting to the crux of the information that you want. So that's a real I want to almost say a real experience I've had recently where I've read up on a topic and I eventually felt like I just need to go and buy a book and read the entire book so that I can read exactly where it started to where it goes, where, the end of the book, so that you get the entire picture and not just snippets of it. So I think that's the one place where the overconsumption gets me a little bit overwhelmed, I think, is in terms of information. But I think the whole drive for moreness is something that makes it throws my equilibrium out because I don't feel like I actually have control over what I'm consuming. It's information coming at you from all different angles. It is requests coming at you at all different angles. The over availability is another one that falls into the same category. So typically it makes me feel quite overwhelmed, if I have to be very bluntly honest.
I think the empowerment thing that you mentioned is important, and it's something we'll speak about more. We spoke about this topic recently, and I remember when you used to buy CDs. So when I was in high school, we bought CDs. There was no streaming, and you would listen to the entire album because you only had so many CDs. You only had so many songs at your disposal. You would listen to everything. Now you've got a million songs on your phone. You don't ever listen to the entire album. You pick and choose what you want when you want it. And there's no sense of anticipation. It's just there. And you very quickly get bored with things because it is so readily available.
And that's becoming sorry, I'm interrupting, but I think it's becoming a real issue when you look at the young people around us. Especially I've got quite small kids. You've got a teenage son. It's difficult to manage their expectations, I think, and to manage their patience a little bit because they think that everything just happens so quickly, and there's a lot of everything. So they've got a bit of a, I want to say, takeaway mentality already, and you need to really manage that and say, well, some things are worth working for, so that they can start understanding that even though the world is all about overconsumption, and just because you want another pair of shoes doesn't mean you need another pair of shoes. So I think at a very values level and values base in our house, I'm noticing how one needs to manage that expectation around the overconsumption and almost gluttony, to if you want to use a more impactful word.
It's the same thing as when you go to a buffet and you eat way too much. You feel pretty crappy afterwards. And if we get constantly stuck in that mental overload of just consuming, pretty much always feel like I ate too much. It's like Christmas Day all year round. Compared to thinking about actually creating something, actually making something that didn't exist before, as opposed to just being the passive recipient of everything, taking an active approach and making something, whether that is with your hands, whether that is with your, whatever it is that you do. So you've, over the last year or so, have created things from scratch that people have found very useful. And you've started seeing the benefit of having put something out there that didn't exist before. And I want to understand and know, how does it make you feel knowing that you've made something that other people benefit from?
So I think that's a two-part question. The one part is that we're not saying that consumption isn't necessary in order to get to a point where you can create something. Sometimes you do need to take things in, and you need to think about, you need to actually get a bunch of sources before you can actually create something that is necessarily going to be useful.
Yeah.
And then you put something out there and it's ridiculously scary because you have no idea whether or not it's going to be hitting the mark, or whether or not people are going to be the imposter monster like climbs out of you 100% going, you shouldn't be here, you shouldn't be doing that, why are you doing this, you don't have the skills, you haven't read everything on the internet, you haven't done all the courses, why are you doing this? So those questions all pop up, and then you kind of put on your strongman suits and you kind of just go through that wall of the imposter and you do it, you implement it. And I think what I find super rewarding is when someone sends me a message and says, this has changed my life. It's put things into perspective for me. And noticing and realizing that it won't be every single person that's going to send you that message. We've seen it with our articles as well. When we send out an article, we don't necessarily have 100 people respond and go, oh, that was fantastic. And that's not why we do it. But when we do get that odd message going, this to me today means something, it's so rewarding. It feels like, yes, you can do it, and it's empowering. I want to use that word again. It's really empowering. It puts you into a position where you feel like I can carry on. I can create even more. I can do this again. So I think from that perspective, it's super rewarding. But I also think, like I said, it is a process where you realize it's a little bit scary first, and then move through the scariness to move towards actually implementing something. I think something I'd like to maybe add is something I recently started implementing, and it's something I got from a podcast, and I can't remember which one, but it was the concept of a think day. And the idea is exactly to counter this overconsumption mentality that we have, because we either consuming, or we're busy consuming, or we're busy doing, but we're not thinking about what we're consuming. And the idea around the think day is to buy our time, whether it's a full day or whether it's a few hours, to just spend time thinking through what's happening, what you've consumed, and how the dots connect. And that has been super powerful in terms of just creating some mental space to put things where they need to be in terms of the information, and also highlighting where there might be areas that I need to be doing a little bit more consumption to get a bit of a better idea around what it looks like or how it should be working.
That idea of you don't know whether people are going to like it, you don't know whether people are going to think it's useful, that is one of the main things that keeps us from actually putting something out there. And I think also that goes along with that is we look at something and we think, oh, somebody else has already done it. Why would I do it? Or I won't be the best, or I don't know how to do it yet. I don't know how to do it perfectly, so I'm just rather not going to do it. And everybody has cool ideas that would be beneficial to others. But we can come up with so many reasons as to why not to do it that typically we don't go into action. And now we've seen not millions of examples, but we every now and again get an example of if we just actually do it, somebody's going to find benefit from it. And it's not rocket science type stuff. It's things that people typically, many of them should be able to do it themselves, but they don't. And they just need a little bit of guidance. So I think also that is important to understand that it doesn't need to be super sophisticated, or fancy, or groundbreaking in order to be useful.
Yeah, I think the idea is, so what? That sounds ridiculous, but it's kind of the way I went into this example that you're using of creating something where people can find a community where that supports them in terms of their fitness journey, but also in terms of a lifestyle change. And I was petrified, I won't even lie, but the whole idea of, so what if there's only one person that gets value from it? Then one person
is
got
enough.
value from it.
Exactly.
And the fact that it's rewarding for me personally to be part of their journey is huge. So I think a lot of times we get stuck because we think about all the what ifs rather than the so whats. So I think that's something I kind of put once, and I said, I'm not going to overplan it. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to jump in and do it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I adjust my sails along the way. And I think it's about becoming more resilient to that as well. That there will be people that are going to be naysayers, and there will be people that won't agree with you. And I'm glad there's people that don't agree with me, because then it means that there's a space for someone else to get value, and there's a loophole for someone else to create value for people. So it doesn't have to always be that you need to have, it doesn't have to be for everyone. That's basically what
Nothing ever is. And for you to not overthink it and not overcomplicate is a massive step, because you are like one of the world champions in doing that.
Yes, I am a deliberator. That is my top strength on my strength finder. So I'm a deliberator by heart. I overanalyze and overthink everything. So for me not to do that is huge, yes.
You've mentioned empowerment or feeling empowered a couple of times. I think that is probably the strongest thing that comes through when we create something. Whether it is something big, small, sophisticated, new, fancy, whatever. I think it creates a sense of, I've got some agency in this world, and I don't just have to be the recipient of whatever it throws at me. I've got the ability to make a change in it. I can change course. I can contribute. Whether in whatever way that might be, I think it's a very empowering, again, is the word, that I'm not just a passenger in life. I'm actually somebody that's actively contributing in whatever way.
Maybe I have a question for you this time. But to create the context, I think, and this is a thought I just had, is overconsumption could potentially be the tool that we use to keep ourselves unseen. And I maybe want your thoughts on that, and what maybe just to further explain my thought is, when we're consuming, we don't have to be producing. And we're not producing, we're not putting ourselves into a vulnerable position to get feedback. And most of us are not well acclimatized to feedback. So what are your thoughts around that?
Definitely. It's like busy work, keeping yourself busy and saying, but I was busy. Where it's like procrastinating, essentially. Where you are keeping yourself busy with the stuff that you shouldn't be, while you should be studying, for example. A friend of mine that I used to live with when I was a student, whenever exams rolled by, he would start cleaning his room and ironing his clothes. He never ever did that throughout the year. He had the worst room in the world. But that kept him busy, keep him from studying. And I think the consumption is the same thing, where we have this notion that there's something that I need to do, there's something that I need to contribute or make or create. But it's going to place me in a vulnerable position, and people might reject it. People might say it's not good enough. And I struggle. Most of us don't want, like you said, that type of feedback. So I'm still preparing. I'm still doing research. I'm not ready yet to do it. I'm still gathering information. But it's just a way to keep yourself from actually committing and doing the thing that you should be doing.
So I think what I'm hearing while you speak is the perfectionism mindset and the idea that if it's not perfect, then we can't roll it out. And I think that links to this overconsumption as well. It keeps us stuck in, if it's not perfect, we can't put it out there. But nothing's perfect. We need to actually keep working at it. And the only way you're going to know whether or not there are things to improve on is by actually putting it out there and seeing what comes back. So I think what I'm hearing from your explanation is very much linked to the idea of overconsumption and perfectionism.
Is creating the best way to learn how to do things?
Definitely, because it's active. It's you're actually participating in trying it out. So I'll give an example. I run fitness classes as my passion project, and I had to record a bunch of them, and I realized, oh goodness, this is quite tough and maybe a little bit too tough for a fitness class that is aimed at bringing everyone into the class. So the only way I would have known that is by actually creating it, doing it, and seeing that I need to make adjustments. So one does learn by doing. And that's always been, you and I both know from all our training background that is the best way of getting anyone to learn anything, is by actually having them try it themselves, do it themselves. So yes, I do think that creating is the best way to learn.
It has a bunch of positive influences and impacts.
I have another example. So often when we write, I actually mentioned this example to you a while ago where I said, I find it interesting that I retain a lot more information when I, for example, read about a concept and then I write about it. As soon as I've written about it, it's like it becomes internalized, and I've added my own voice to it. And that's a typical example of where creating becomes something that actually internalizes learning. It makes it real for you. So definitely that's just an example I was thinking of now that applies.
And thinking about creating, about being creative, my default thought is always music, art, writing. Those are the creative endeavors. But it is not. It is not limited to that. It can be something like solving a problem for somebody, or creating an environment in which people like to live, or creating a business that people want to work in, or creating a fantastic meal. I had dinner with you a month or so ago, and you always make the best meals, and you make it from scratch, and it's always like something new that you try. And I love eating it because it's always, it's fresh and it's well thought through, and it creates an experience that is enjoyable. So we don't have to limit ourselves to just thinking we can only be creative in a very limited set of areas.
I agree with you 100%. I think the best way of seeing how creation happens is by watching toddlers play. They create things out of boxes, and they create things out of, I don't know what they were running around with a few minutes ago, but I'm probably going to walk out and find some
creative chaos.
Chaos as well. But I think that is how we create, is by playing. And I think if we can, I think the interesting thing is when we do play, we take the pressure off. We don't think about it as this competition or this drive for excellence or perfection, maybe excellence, but not perfection.
Or something you're going to be judged on.
Exactly. You're just playing. And I think that's what we need to get to when we do these creative ventures. Like, how can we create workspaces where people are going to be enjoying being there? And that's just an internalization of what you've learned from work. Think about what you know works and what doesn't work, and create a space that emulates that. So I think there's a bunch of different ways to think about it, but play is definitely one that can get you out of that creative rut.
I think that is a good quick chat.
I think so too.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Lekker.